Welcome back. We start a news bulletin from Pakistan, where military says it has killed 5 terrorists while thwarting an attack on a security checkpost in the country's northwestern Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. The military's media wing said a soldier was martyred while 3 others wounded in the terrorist ambush in Miran Shah, North Waziristan. The Inter-Services Public Relations said troops cordoned the area and carried out a search operation. The martyred soldier has been identified as Havaldar Akbar Hussain Khan, who belonged to the Bagh area of Azad Kashmir. Last month, the Army's Colonel Mujibur Rahman embraced martyrdom during crossfire with terrorists. Moving on, Kabul says the Taliban have killed 28 security personnel in the Takhar and Baghlan provinces. A provincial government spokesperson said 19 security personnel were killed and 5 others wounded in Takhar's Khwajagar district. He said the situation is under control as backup forces were deployed in the area and a search operation is underway. Meanwhile, police say 9 security personnel were killed and 5 others, including a child, wounded in the Sholgara district of Balkh. Officials say 3 Taliban, including their commander Maulavi Saifuddin, were also killed. The Taliban are yet to comment on the attacks. In a related development, the Taliban claimed the US is violating the Doha peace deal by launching airstrikes and attacks on the group in Afghanistan. In a document, the fighters said the US and Afghan forces have launched 50 attacks at them across the country. They said 33 drone attacks and airstrikes have been carried out in 19 provinces from March 9 to April 10th. The Taliban say they have lost 35 of their fighters in 17 of the incidents, adding that 65 civilians have also been killed by the forces. The group said most attacks have been conducted in Zabul, Maidan Vardak, Helmand, Kunduz, Farah and Laghman provinces. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation has condemned the Islamophobic sentiments in India amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Since the outbreak, the Indian government and media have accused Muslims of spreading the deadly virus in the country. OIC Independent Permanent Human Rights Commission asked New Delhi to take steps against anti-Muslim sentiments. It said India must protect the rights of its persecuted Muslim minority as per its obligations under international law. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Narendra Modi's ruling BJP has given a communal angle to the lynching of 3 Hindus in Maharashtra state. On April 17th, the mob lynched 3 persons, 2 from a nomadic tribe and 1 driver, accusing them of robbery. In India, the US and Bahrain have evacuated their citizens as the country extended its complete lockdown to contain coronavirus. At least 3 people boarded a special flight from the US in the northern Ludhiana. Bahrain evacuated more than 100 of its citizens from western Pune city. The government extended the countrywide lockdown till 3rd May after the number of cases hit 10,000 on 13th April. India currently has over 17,500 cases and more than 500 deaths. More from India. Impoverished citizens living in the capital New Delhi and its neighboring areas are bearing the brunt of the BJP government's anti-COVID-19 policies. Earlier this week, India's government extended the world's biggest nationwide lockdown until 3rd May to contain the spread of the coronavirus. More in this report.
For almost a month, the auto rickshaw drivers of Delhi haven't had any work. One such driver asks how 8 people can survive if they are only given enough food for 4 people. These drivers say they're living off their savings and it's running out fast.
I have been sitting idle since March 22. I have run out of my savings. I couldn't even leave for my hometown. My wife and children are also living here. I have been getting food by standing in queues of some social workers. I have no means of earning. I have no idea when will the lockdown end.
Domestic workers aren't faring much better. Many of them have been sacked by their employers and evicted from their quarters.
I am very worried. I don't have money to even bring medicines for my daughter with heart disease. I went to the police asking them to let me work, but they sent me back saying it is not allowed. I told my employer to give me some money in advance for my daughter's medicine, but they did not help me either.
With the end of the lockdown nowhere in sight, the fate of impoverished Indians hangs in a precarious balance. Meanwhile, health professionals working on the front lines of the pandemic are appealing for more protective gear. India currently has nearly 13,000 active coronavirus cases and over 500 deaths.
Now, the global death toll from the new coronavirus has surged past 165,000 with over 2.4 million infection cases. In Spain, nearly 400 people died in the last 24 hours, taking the toll to nearly 21,000. Meanwhile, Iran has reported 91 new deaths, increasing the total to over 5,200. Earlier, the United States reported 2,000 fatalities in a day, pushing the country's overall total to more than 40,000. Further details in this report.
As countries struggle to contain the coronavirus pandemic, people have become frustrated with the lockdown measures implemented to curb the disease. In a tweet, President Donald Trump signaled support for the protests, flouting all social distance rules, asking states to lift all restrictions. The protests against stay-at-home orders have flared in a number of states.
Our best defense is a healthy immune system, and I take care of my body. I eat the right food, I take vitamins, I drink the right water. Vitamin D, vitamin C, it's been proven already. So we have everything that we need. We don't need a vaccine. You know, my body, my choice. I take care of myself. I should be able to have the freedoms to go out and do my work, my business, my job, take care of my family.
Meanwhile, Australia is easing lockdown, and New Zealand is set to relax some of its most stringent restrictions from next Monday. Elsewhere, France has made wearing of face masks in public transport obligatory from May 11th as the country prepares to ease restrictions.
Public transport is one of the examples where wearing a mask could be required starting May 11th. We are studying the conditions for how this could be put in place. But it is likely that when it comes to public transport, when it comes to these places where logically there is high density, it would be necessary for users to wear a regular mask.
China's National Health Commission says there were no deaths reported on the mainland for the second consecutive day. In South Korea, new infections have slowed as less than 20 new cases were reported in third day in a row.
Meanwhile, Pakistan has recorded 17 deaths by the new coronavirus in the last 24 hours, taking the death toll to 176. The Health Ministry says 425 new confirmed cases were reported in the last 24 hours, bringing the total to over 8,400. Officials said 1,970 patients have recovered so far. The ministry said over 104,000 tests have been conducted countrywide, with nearly 5,000 in the last 24 hours. Meanwhile, the National Disaster Management Authority says there is no shortage of testing kits in the country. In an interview, NDMA chairperson Lieutenant General Muhammad Afzal said around 800,000 kits are available. In other news, in Tel Aviv, thousands of Israelis have held a historic demonstration against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu while observing social distancing rules. The protesters called on rival Benny Gantz not to join a coalition led by Netanyahu, who is charged with corruption. Thousands of people demonstrated standing 6 feet apart in Tel Aviv's Rabin Square. They chanted slogans against Netanyahu while holding "Save the Democracy" banners. Israel's opposition lawmakers joined the demonstrations and criticized government policies for handling the pandemic.
Fighting for everything and anything that is essential to the future of this country and our children, the Israeli democracy, and the way this government is in its sloppiness is handling the corona crisis.
The Black Flag demonstrations are also a response to stringent coronavirus policies that include phone tracking for civilians. Now moving on to Iraq, which says it has killed several ISIS militants during an air-backed operation in Salahuddin province. The military said it targeted the fighters' hideout at an island in the Tigris River near the town of Al-Dur. It did not provide details on the number of casualties. In a separate incident, an Iraqi soldier was killed and another wounded after ISIS militants ambushed the soldiers in Mahor town. Last week, Iraqi forces killed 31 ISIS fighters in Kirkuk province. The Yemeni government has condemned the arrest of a former culture minister by the Houthi rebels in Sana'a. The former minister was known for his critical writings on the Houthis since the outbreak of the conflict in Yemen. In a statement, Yemen's information minister said the government condemns the arrest of former Minister of Culture Khalid al-Ruwayshin from his home. On Sunday morning, al-Ruwayshin's son also confirmed his father's arrest by the Houthis without giving further details. Yemen's capital has been under the control of Houthi rebels since September 2014. Tens of thousands of Yemenis, including civilians, are believed to have been killed in the conflict between the two sides. More from the Middle East. Libya's UN-recognized Government of National Accord has shot down a UAE drone in the northern part of the country. In a statement, a government spokesperson, the Emirati UAV was shot down south of Misrata city. He said it was a Chinese-made drone equipped with guided missiles. The incident occurred after the government forces launched a military operation to recapture Tarhouna town. Abu Dhabi, which is one of the main supporters of warlord Khalifa Haftar, has yet to comment on the incident. Earlier, the GNA forces captured 102 fighters loyal to renegade commander Khalifa Haftar. The military said it has also captured areas of Al-Tawesha and Salah al-Din south of Tripoli. The UN-backed government launched Operation Peace Storm on 26 March to counter Haftar's offensive. In Libya, the UN-recognized government says one of its soldiers was killed and two others wounded in a missile attack by Khalifa Haftar's forces south of Tripoli. The ministry said the Eastern Army also struck nearby civilian settlements. Meanwhile, the UN's mission in Libya said 23 attacks were carried out on health facilities over the last year. The mission said 9 of those attacks were carried out in 2020, killing 5 people and wounding 12. Libya has been torn apart by a civil war between the GNA and the Libyan National Army since April last year. In Mali, polls have closed for the second round of legislative elections, which were conducted despite coronavirus fears and the threat of militant attacks. Voters cast their ballots to elect 147 MPs for the National Assembly. The first round of voting on March 29th was disrupted by attacks, including the kidnapping of opposition leader Soumaïla Cissé. Acts of intimidation were also reported in the runoff vote. A parliamentary candidate said he was scared and had to hide to visit his own constituents. Local media said the president of a voting station was forcibly removed and representatives of the Electoral Commission chased away by armed men. The country has been plagued by conflict since 2012 when rebels captured much of Mali's arid north. Gunmen have killed 47 people in attacks on villages in the northwestern Nigerian state of Katsina on the weekend. Police said armed bandits holding AK-47 guns carried out the attacks. Hundreds of people have been killed in the last year by criminal gangs carrying out robberies and kidnappings in northwest Nigeria. The authorities said police and Nigerian military have been tasked to investigate the incidents. President Muhammadu Buhari, in a statement, said he will not tolerate large-scale killing of innocent people by criminal gangs. He said the attacks will be met with decisive force. 4 employees of international NGO Doctors Without Borders who were kidnapped in the eastern province of South Kivu in Congo have been released. This comes after intensive talks held by the NGO and local authorities with the abductors. Local media says the staff was released in the village of Nizimbi in the Fizi territory. The violence in the country has displaced tens of thousands of people, forcing UN partners to reduce the number of aid workers on the ground. Last week, the UN expressed concerns that the escalation of violence in the Congo's east will subvert the nation's fight against the coronavirus. We have a lot more coming up right after this short break, so stay tuned. Welcome back. In Canada, a gunman dressed as a policeman killed 17 people in a 12-hour rampage in the eastern province of Nova Scotia. Officials said the 51-year-old suspected shooter was also killed by the police. Authorities said a female police officer died fighting the assailant while another one was injured. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has described it as a terrible situation. Police say the incident in the coastal town of Puerto Pique was the worst modern-era shooting in the country's history. G20 health ministers have acknowledged weaknesses in health systems which made the world vulnerable to the COVID-19 outbreak. The ministers held a virtual meeting to share experiences and preventative measures to contain the pandemic. In a statement, G20 said the ministers discussed systemic weaknesses exposed by the pandemic. Saudi Health Minister Tawfiq Al-Rabia proposed a global task force to respond to pandemics and improve the healthcare system. WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said the bloc should work on a joint response.
We have engaged thousands of scientists and experts all over the world to develop detailed technical guidance to countries. We have shipped supplies of lab diagnostics and personal protective equipment to many countries and expanded testing capacity. We shared the same planet. We shared the same hopes and dreams.
China has rejected Australia's queries of Beijing not being transparent on the coronavirus epidemic. This comes after Australia's Foreign Minister Marise Payne called for an international investigation into the origins of the virus and how it spread. China's Foreign Ministry spokesman Geng Shuang said Beijing have grave concerns about the remarks made by Australia. He said the allegations are groundless and China has always been open and transparent about COVID-19.
China's performance and our contribution have been widely praised by the international community. Any doubts on China's transparency in prevention and control of this epidemic is not in line with the facts, nor does it respect the great efforts and sacrifices made by the Chinese people for the disease prevention and control.
Germany has begun easing lockdown measures today after declaring that the outbreak is under control. In the first wave of relaxations, the majority of shops smaller than 800 square meters will be allowed to welcome customers again. Chancellor Angela Merkel and regional state premiers announced the decision last week, terming it as a cautious first step. Each of Germany's 16 states is set to lift restrictions depending upon the extent of their local infection transmission. Merkel is hoping to reinvigorate the ailing German economy, which entered recession last week. This comes as Germany's coronavirus cases rose by nearly 1,800 to over 141,000, with 110 more deaths, taking the tally to over 4,400. Russian President Vladimir Putin says the coronavirus crisis is under full control, despite a record daily rise in cases. Russia has reported over 6,000 new cases in the last 24 hours, bringing its nationwide tally to nearly 43,000. In a video message to wish Christians on the Orthodox Easter, Putin said everything will work out with God's help. The Russian leader said his country had all the necessary resources to do what was needed for people's health and economy. A Kremlin spokesperson said they are hoping the number of cases will eventually begin to decrease from next week. Health experts in the UK say they are starting human trials by using the blood of coronavirus survivors to treat ill patients. At least 70 groups of scientists across the world have been working to develop a coronavirus vaccine, while only 5 have reached the human trial phase. The NHS Institute is asking people who have recovered from COVID-19 to donate their blood so it can access the therapy in trials. In a statement, the NHS said the method will be initially used in trials as a possible treatment for COVID-19. Medics said they are working with the government and all relevant bodies to move through the approvals process. The plasma treatment takes antibodies from the healed patients, which can be used as a recovery tool. The US has already started a major project to study the plasma method involving over 1,500 hospitals. We're taking a short break. Stay with us. For our top business story, let's look at the oil markets. US crude oil price has slumped to about $13 per barrel, crashing to a 20-year low of nearly 29%. US storage facilities are now struggling to cope with the glut of oil, weakening prices further under travel restrictions worldwide due to COVID-19. The oil price continued to slide even after OPEC and its allies agreed to the biggest ever output cut to backstop prices. Economists remain unconvinced the cuts can offset catering demand for the commodity as economic activity is grinding to halt under lockdowns. Last week, International Energy Agency said global oil demand will fall by over 9 million barrels per day in 2020. It said global economy is under worse pressure since the Great Depression in 1930s, and fall in demand will erase almost a decade of growth. Democratic leaders and the White House are close to an agreement for a $450 billion loan program. It is aimed at helping small businesses stay afloat and provide funds for hospitals and coronavirus testing. At a White House briefing, President Donald Trump said there is a good chance of getting a deal. He suggested there could be a resolution today. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said earlier he was hopeful of a deal that could pass Congress quickly. He said funding for states will not be included in the interim bill. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.